from Governor Henry McMaster in Columbia. You can see.
In our way, it has now been.
Let's listen in.
Florence has now been declared a hurricane. It is no longer a tropical storm. That means it is over 75 miles an hour and getting stronger. There has been a slight change, and that is the hurricane. Now, hurricane is coming to us a little bit slower. That is, it's traveling across the ocean a little slower than it was yesterday in our direction. But on the other hand, it is spinning much faster than it was yesterday. And all estimates are that it'll be spinning even faster by the time it gets to the East Coast, which apparently it is going to do, is get to the East Coast. And when it gets here, it's estimated it may be, this is an estimate, a Category 4 hurricane, which is between 130 and 156 miles an hour. You see the cone there, that is not the area of which the hurricane is expected to affect. That area there, that cone, that bubble, is the area in which the eye of the hurricane is, as of today, based on current temporary information, that is where the eye of the hurricane is expected to be at this time. That is right now, as near as we can forecast. It may change. It may go farther north. It could go farther south. As you know, the atmospheric conditions that are controlling all of that, but everyone, all the weather forecasters seem to be fairly certain that that's a good forecast for now. Now tomorrow it may change, but what that means for us in South Carolina is that whatever happens, we're going to have a lot of rain and a lot of wind. Even if the hurricane goes farther north than is anticipated in this graphic, we're still going to have a lot of water and a lot of wind. So what that means is we need to be prepared. As I mentioned yesterday, the official side of our preparations is being done in a magnificent fashion. We've had practice doing this, as you know, in recent years, and Team South Carolina is on the job. People are being activated. I issued the executive order yesterday that allowed a lot of things to happen and to happen more quickly, and we're moving assets and people to the coast, getting people in place to respond to whatever happens. But I say this, although the official side of this is being done with great precision, great skill, and great speed, it's the unofficial side, that is the citizens, that have a part that is important to play, and that is make your plans now. If you have pretend, assume, presume that a major hurricane is going to hit right smack dab in the middle of South Carolina and may go way inshore. And that means winds and water. So you have to get your medicines ready to go. If you have prescriptions you need filled, better get them filled. If you have relatives who need to be alerted to where you might go or where you can go, tell them, take care of your pets. Be sure to lock things up because you may not be coming home for several days. So that means you may need to take food, you may need to take flashlights, depending on where you're going to go. But there's a lot of information that's available at scemd.org, scemd.org. There's ample information that provides all that we're discussing. And also, I call your attention again to the South Carolina Hurricane Guide. This is about as good as it gets. It's online at scemd.org. And in some places you can pick up a hard copy. But if you can't find those, go online. It's got everything you need to know. It's very easy to read, easy to understand. And if we'll all just follow these rules and prepare for this, what is likely going to be a strong hit on South Carolina, we don't know how much. We can't predict for sure, but we know we're going to have a lot of wind and a lot of rain. And remember, it doesn't take much to knock down a telephone pole. 40-mile-an-hour wind can knock down a telephone pole, and there goes your power until it can get fixed. So be prepared, be ready. And I need to tell you, I submitted today to President Trump a request for a federal emergency declaration in anticipation of the impact on South Carolina. What that means is we're asking for authorization in advance to make application to get reimbursed for expenses for people, machinery, and assets we may need to clean up and fix whatever damage results from this, what is now a hurricane. With that, I'd like to call on the weatherman, John Quirello of the National Weather Service. John?
Thank you, Governor. Good afternoon. As the Governor mentioned, Florence is now a Category 1 hurricane. It's still moving slowly to the west, about 6 miles per hour. Florence will begin to rapidly strengthen, becoming a major hurricane by Monday evening. A turn to the northwest and an increase in forward speed will then occur through the middle of the week. Florence is expected to approach the southeast coast as a major hurricane on Thursday. On this current track, the tropical storm force winds could arrive across parts of the South Carolina coast by Thursday morning. And as the governor mentioned, given the slower approach, that's just a little bit later than what we were expecting yesterday. While the official forecast shows Florence making landfall across southeast North Carolina, it's still important to remember that the cone of uncertainty still covers the entire South Carolina coast, as the governor also mentioned, meaning that landfall along coastal South Carolina is still a possibility. Remember, the storm is still 5 days out, and changes to the track can and likely will occur. In addition, any impacts, including wind, heavy rainfall, and storm surge, will extend well away from the center of the storm. Florence is expected to slow or even stall over the Carolinas and mid-Atlantic region for at least several days after making landfall, and could result in significant flash flooding and eventually river flooding, depending on the track. So at this point, it's still important to continue preparations. And again, for more hurricane safety tips and other resources from the Weather Service, you can go to weather.gov/safety. Thank you.
Let me mention one thing on that. When you watch the National Weather Reports, as most of us have been doing for several days now, you remember those national reports are for a national audience. They're not tailor-made for South Carolina. What you're hearing from us is tailor-made for South Carolina, and we go into more depth and more detail. And that's why when you see on the National Weather Reports, you see what would appear to be a cone, or the hurricane seems to be drifting away. That's not a prediction. The prediction is fairly well represented by this cone, and again, it's the outlying edges, that white line going around the outside. That is where the eye of the hurricane may be. Not the extent of the winds of the hurricane. That'll go up maybe 100 miles on either side, but the eye of the hurricane. So by this prediction here, the eye of the hurricane could come in down in Jasper County, around Savannah, or go all the way up to Maryland, or anywhere in between. So we don't know what's going to happen, but we know this: the official part of the state response mechanism is in gear and working and is ready, and we want all the people to be smart and prepare for what could be a very hard blow to South Carolina. General Livingston.
Thank you, Governor. Based on the governor's executive order and coordination with all of Team South Carolina, almost 3,000 people are being pre-positioned for contingencies throughout South Carolina. We've activated over 800 National Guardsmen to support state operations, and we are coordinating with all of our neighbors. And to tell you how fluid this storm is, we're talking to North Carolina. We're getting commitments of assets from them if something happens in South Carolina, and they're getting commitments from us for assets if something happens in North Carolina. So we're making contingency plans for the whole range of impact of the storm, and we will be prepared. I will emphasize what the governor said is your individual preparedness and your individual awareness. Please make sure that you are prepared to evacuate if necessary. And we will be providing, the governor will be providing timely information to allow you to execute those plans that you make if something does happen. So you have to plan on that cone, and then as the situation develops, the governor will officially notify you in time so that you can make your moves. But we do appreciate the entire cooperation of Team South Carolina, and that includes all the citizens of South Carolina. Thank you, Governor.
Thanks, sir. Yes, sir. Kim Stinson, Director of Emergency Management Division.
Thank you, sir. A couple updates. The State Emergency Operations Center, which we're at right now, is operational with partial agency staffing, state agency staffing, and will remain for at least the near term, and will probably ramp up to full staffing tomorrow on Monday. Response priorities right now are evacuation planning and execution to include sheltering if we have to do any of that. And then also, we're also taking a look at the follow-on operations potentially post-evacuation, and that would be the response and also damage assessment. The governor also already mentioned about the emergency declaration, but our FEMA federal coordinating officer, who will be in charge of FEMA assets once they arrive here in South Carolina, will be here Monday, also with an advance team to start the planning process should we have to evacuate. In terms of the local authorities and the counties, we stay in contact with them at least twice a day to make sure that we understand what their status is and whether or not they have any unmet needs. Most of the county EOCs, the Emergency Operations Centers, are being staffed to some extent today, and their primary focus is the same as ours. It's the possible evacuation and sheltering mission that we may have. We'll also, today, are deploying some of our South Carolina Emergency Management Division personnel to the coastal counties, so they'll be embedded with the Emergency Operations Center, so we'll have better coordination and understanding and situational awareness on the ground down there. In terms of logistics, and that's a lot of what we do here, helping out the county's resource logistics, and we've got our contracts for commodities, general logistical support, and also transport. And as General Livingston mentioned, coordinating with other states for the possibility of receiving out-of-state assets should we need them. And we're looking at least 3 areas right now, and that's incident management, swiftwater rescue, and air support. In terms of public information, we continue to emphasize the individual preparedness. We have an active social media campaign where we're pushing out information all the time. In terms of the personal preparedness, and the governor's already talked about our website and our hurricane guide, but also would like to mention our emergency manager application that can be downloaded on your smartphone that has almost all the information that's on our website. And very importantly, it has the Know Your Zone module, which will allow you to type in your address if you live along the coast, and it will tell you which zone you're in or if you're not in a zone. So we invite everybody to look at that. And again, all those sources, the app, the hurricane guide, and the website have lots of great information to get each one of us prepared. So we ask that everybody be their own personal emergency manager and make a plan and make it personal and be ready for whatever happens. Thank you, sir.
One question, you mentioned these zones. What are the different zones? What difference does that make to the average citizen?
Right now, basically most counties have more than one zone that they're divided up in, and depending on the category of the storm, and it'll go further inland, obviously, if it's a stronger storm. So generally what we call the evacuation zone, the alphas, the A areas, are the ones that are located right along the coast. And then further inland, there's B zones, and then even further inland, there may be C zones. And it depends on the category of storm, whether or not you'd have to evacuate if that comes to pass.
Mr. Stinson, how many members of that FEMA team that's arriving Monday? Do you know yet?
I think they're probably somewhere in the 15 to 20 category, and that's an initial planning group, if you will, that'll help us work specific areas, whether it's operations or logistics, and we just have them on the ground to do that planning.
More questions? No, it doesn't look like a hurricane's coming out there, but one is.
Governor, for someone who is living inland who may not think this is such a big deal because the storm may weaken as it moves inland, what would you say to that?
I'd say get ready, because the winds on this one are predicted to be more powerful than they were on Hugo, which is the one that had some very powerful winds, and that went all the way through Columbia into Charlotte and knocked down all the big live oak trees in Charlotte. So I would say prepare for the worst and hope for the best. But indications, as indicated earlier, is that the storm is moving very slowly, although the winds are getting faster and faster. As it goes over warmer and warmer water, it starts spinning more and more. But it's moving slowly, so that means that it may be just parked here on top of us for longer than we've had one here before. Often they'll just move right through. Well, this one's moving very slow, and with those high winds, it could do a lot of damage. Just get prepared. Prepare for the worst, but hope for the best.
Governor, are we thinking about reversing the lanes on the interstates?
We're considering all of those things. We're considering everything from A to Z on how to keep the people and property safe. And we'll be making the appropriate announcements at the appropriate time with plenty of lead time and notice in advance. And our team has been in contact with the rest of the team all around the state, and particularly in hospitals and nursing homes and other things that require a little bit more advance notice, but there's constant communication among the entire network.
Governor, is there a fixed timeline right
No.
Will it be looked at?
No, sir. Well, we're looking at it all the time. We're studying what information we have, and things have changed a little bit from this time yesterday till now, and they'll probably change some more tomorrow. But we are constantly reviewing, analyzing the information to determine what the best course of action is.
Of course, people asking Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Yeah, we
can't say right.
Really can't say now. Don't want to say. We don't want to be in error. But I would say listen to what we say and watch your television and go to these websites, and there's plenty of information there. And when there's an announcement to make, you can be assured we'll announce it in plenty of time to give everyone plenty of notices. And we got really a great team working on this, so we expect to be very reliable for the people of this state.
Again, can we repeat the number of activated personnel in place to deal with those contingency plans and the National Guardsmen?
Right now we have about 800 National Guardsmen activated, but then we also have almost 3,000 DOT and police personnel from the SLED, Department of Natural Resources, Highway Patrol, that are moving to the coast to prepare for contingencies. Now, we have plenty of reserve. We got another 9,000 National Guardsmen we can activate. We have people from neighboring states, but right now we don't need those people, and we will activate as we need. As the governor says, we have internal plans. We just have to see the start point, and the start point is dependent on the storm, and Florence doesn't want to tell us everything yet.
Excellent. Any more questions? Well, stay tuned, and thank you very much.
Well, you just heard from Governor McMaster and other emergency management officials. I believe the major takeaway from this press conference was maybe one sentence from the governor: presume a major hurricane will hit. That's what the governor just said. The question of if is starting to slowly fade away. Now it's just a matter of when, with the governor saying it's likely going to be a strong hit to South Carolina. Of course, they're looking at all options at this point. You heard the possibility, of course, reversing lanes. You have emergency management. They're moving, thousands of people across the state. They have police officers, National Guard. They have other law enforcement, emergency personnel that are now mobilizing, so they're getting everything in order. Once again today, the governor asking you at home to make yourself prepared to get that emergency kit together, because they were expecting this, as the governor said, to be a major hit, a strong hit, the governor said, to South Carolina. So we, of course, are watching. Chris is here. Of course, Chris is here. He is watching what's happening right now with Hurricane Florence, I could say safely at this point.
Yes, it definitely is a hurricane now. And of course, as you heard the governor too, requesting a federal declaration of emergency to get help from the federal government and FEMA, all those organizations. But again, this is the storm we're watching, and every day it's getting better and better form, which said in a Facebook Live, form, you want good form when it's a diving competition or dance. You don't want good form when there's a hurricane. And unfortunately, we are seeing that right now. Now, it is still decent distance away. We're talking about 1,400 and 1,450 miles out there. So it's still pretty far, but nonetheless, it is forecast to slowly gain strength and then eventually pick up speed. So watch, it becomes 1, 2, 3, category 4. And then finally, it does show it making towards the coast. Now, as they talked about, the center line, that center of this cone, does take it into North Carolina, specifically right over Wilmington. However, the cone shows the possible path of the center of the storm, not the edges of the storm. So if the center follows the southerly track, obviously we're still right there, and that's where a lot of the concern still lies. Looking at the spaghetti plots, these are all the different models laid over one another. Again, most of them showing towards North Carolina, but there's still a couple that take it further south. Of course, there's that one outlier, but we're going to ignore that one as much as we would like to count that one. So there is where the brunt of them are. Now notice too how a couple of them swirl. That is a third concern that's now developing is this storm going to stall out and become a big rain event like what we saw with Harvey, but in this case over North Carolina, parts of South Carolina, and even edging into Virginia. So the Euro versus the GFS, once again, the Euro still takes the southerly track and pushes through, but it clears out quicker. The GFS slows down, but it hangs out more over land, which if that were the case, then it would more be flooding that would be the bigger concern. So either case, not exactly what we want. Really, we just want the storm to stay out and stay away from us. So like we said, gaining strength, landfall is, I'm going to switch from possible to probable. I'm not going to say for sure, but definitely it is increasing. There is still some uncertainty exactly as to where, because again, the further south along that cone it is, the more we're going to get it here. The further north, the more it's going to be for North Carolina. So still go over those plans, be prepared. And as they talked about, evacuation's still not out yet, but they are going to start considering and looking at some of those things. So that's what we're looking at right now. And again, Angela, we're going to go ahead. I'm going to pull this up one more time just so we can get a look at that storm, just exactly what it's looking at, because it really is gaining some strength and developing. So we are seeing, like I said, good form with the storm. No eye yet, but typically you don't get an eye until the storms are over a certain threshold of speed, and we're not quite there yet, but it is starting to clear out. So
you know, we're a few days away, and one thing that they touched upon in the press conference was those evacuation routes and making sure that you know the zones, you know, the zone that you're in that can kind of guide you if there is a chance, if you need to evacuate your home for whatever circumstances. We did have the zones up a second ago so people can know where to go, because those zones right here also important, especially in a situation like this where you're going to have virtually so many people, possibly, of course, it's still a possibility, on the road trying to exit their homes to get to someplace safer, their homes, their jobs, whatever it may be. So there are these evacuation zones that are crucial in a situation like this. They're right here on your screen, but we have so much of the state, of course, also online.
Yeah, no, and you know, one thing too I want to emphasize with people is just there is still a big unknown factor. I mean, I was just looking at the models. You saw those spaghetti plots. I was looking at them all zoomed in close, and it really is amazing because take the Euro, for example. If we were to follow the Euro right now, the rain differences, you would have the southern parts of even Charleston County would get nothing. But then you get towards Allendale would be about an inch, and then by the time you get to Myrtle Beach, you're talking 4, 5, 6 inches. So, right. But if it takes a farther south track, obviously we're going to get a lot more. And then even if it goes farther north than that, we might not see anything. So there's still a lot of unknowns.
But either way, you have to get prepared. I mean, they're expecting lots of rain, they're expecting lots of wind, and there are things that people need to do right now, 5 days out, you know, before anything happens. So we keep, you know, tossing this up, letting viewers see these lists because they're simply so important. Okay, it's very important for viewers to know what they need to do to get ready. But overall, this is a very, this is a long-term plan, as you heard from emergency managers. They are not only looking at evacuations plans, they're looking at shelter, they're even looking at post-evacuation plans. You'd heard emergency officials saying there that they put in paperwork, a declaration to President Trump for emergency federal declaration. That is essential in a situation like this because it frees up money just in case something happens when this hurricane hits us in whatever form, so that we can have the money at the ready in order to get not only reimbursed but to get things moving. And then of course they've also reached out to FEMA to get the ball rolling if this becomes a major event. But we are here and we will be tracking. Chris will be tracking.
tracking.
We're also going to hear from Tri-County officials. They have a press conference scheduled, I believe, for around 3 o'clock, where they're going to give us an update on what's happening, you know, here in the Low Country, how they're preparing us for Hurricane Florence. And we'll have that update coming up for you at 3 o'clock. So just come back here at 3 o'clock. We'll have more governor wrap-up and also from Tri-County officials.
These stars in a film.
We had no clue that filming these videos would lead to birthing a whole new sport called freestyle motocross and actually making a way for us to make a living.
The punk rock music, the videos,
the jumps, the big air, and the dirt bikes. I mean, there's such a cool movement there. And that's when I was really realizing that there's a future.
ESPN had launched a new network, ESPN2, and the centerpiece would be a global Olympic-style event, the X Games.